Remember CompUSA, the old retailers?
I love CompUSA. If I could say something real quick, I love CompUSA because back then you could buy a game, you could rip it on a DVD burner and then return it.
Absolutely. The good old days.
I did
right?
it. Guys,
Not
I did
that we
it.
ever did that, but
Peter Saddington, your big game hunter. And guys, we have our sights on someone special today. Only a mother could invest in this idea.
Made this like super artistic.
That is actually absolutely correct. And that's a very, very astute assessment, actually.
True startup story, guys. You got it. Your company just got seed round financed. Congratulations. You're going to the moon. But now you have to scale. You found great talent out in California, New York, Georgia, and even Eastern Europe. So what communications platform will you be using to ensure your international team is always aligned? Well, the answer is easy. Slack.com for Teams. We've used Slack for all of our previous startups, and they've supported us in tremendous ways. And we want to give them a thanks today for supporting vchunting.com. Did you also know that Slack is a great tool for personal use? Yeah, I use my own personal Slack channel to drop in documents, notes, to-dos, and follow-ups to ensure that my workflow throughout the day is right on course. I promise you, if you try out slack.com for personal use, you'll end up using it for your team as well. Go to slack.com to check it out. Welcome everybody to another episode of VC Hunting with me, Peter Saddington. You guys know that we're always on the great hunt for awesome stories of venture capitalists and sometimes some surprising stories from venture capitalists. Guys, I have a great guest today. It's Elliott Durbin, who is the general partner at Boldstart.vc. Elliott, thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Well, let's just jump right in. Boldstart.vc, you're coming up on 10 years. Is that correct?
Yep, it's our 10-year birthday in April.
Congratulations. So we are just less than a month away from doing this for a decade. So tell us, I think that's some great framework for this conversation that we're going to have. Tell us, 10 years in venture capital. What brought you into VC in the beginning, and what has kept you here for almost a decade?
Thanks. It's exciting. I always thought of it as a game of attrition. So every year that I'm still standing. So I got into the world of venture capital by finding out what happens when there's an absence of it. I was about 15 years old. I was in high school.
Ooh.
And it was kind of we'll call it the end of the web 1.0, about 1998, 99. And I started a business. I wanted to kind of skip college and just go right into doing a .com startup. And I built something called templates.com. And it was back in the days when you could go on and find great domains that weren't extremely long.
Right.
And I used to hang out at CompUSA, which was one of those big old, remember CompUSA, the old retailers?
I love CompUSA. If I could say something real quick, I love CompUSA because back then you could buy a game, you could rip it on a DVD burner and then return it.
Absolutely. The good old days.
I did
right?
it. Guys,
Not
I did
that we
it.
ever did that, but I feel like that's a generational thing. I'm still a pirate in a lot of ways. But I used to hang out and watch all the old 386 towers and like all the early kind of computers get repaired. I was a real popular kid. And so I found these boxes that said, hey, Microsoft Office templates, FileMaker Pro templates, things like that. And I ended up getting the domain name, went to CompUSA, bought one of the boxes and just called up the software companies on the back. And I said, hey, you guys are selling your software for, $80 on a CD-ROM or something for 10,000 templates. I'll sell them for $1 a piece. So the unit value goes up. I didn't know any of those terms, but online, it was pretty simple back then. You just put it online, you had a .com business. And
Right.
To my surprise, at my age, they just kind of said, sure, we'll send you an unlocked CD-ROM. Here, sign this. I found out later what I was signing, which is a reseller agreement with lots of teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And, worked with a couple designers, and we got our website launched with an early credit card gateway. First, they sent me a soft terminal. They were like, can you enter the credit card number here? I'm like, no, can we do this automatically? And I wanted to make money while I slept. That was a simple rule. It wasn't that sophisticated or complicated. It was just exciting. And then I had to figure out, okay, I need to get people to the website. And you can still go back in the internet time machine and see this, but it was templates.com. You could, do all these things. And I ended up hacking Alta Vista and the prioritized index bots. I didn't hack them. It was a hack, not to give myself any credit. But I just loaded my webpage up with meta tags. And long story short, it worked. And I became an extremely high ranked result on Yahoo and all the search engines that Alta Vista powered. And I had no experience. I'm still learning, but I was really learning back then on the fly. And I would run in and out of the computer lab in between classes, and I would check my orders on my AOL inbox in the computer lab.
Awesome.
And one day I went in and it was full of dollar orders for this software because I had kind of figured out the SEO.
Right.
And I didn't know what a support ticketing system was. I didn't know that I needed to hire people to help me comply with my reseller agreements. But most importantly, it's always the little stuff that gets you. I didn't know about DBA, doing business as. And I named the company Eliot Durbin and Associates LLC. And no one knew what that was. So they would charge back the revenue that I got. And back then they would ship you via USPS, big mail crates full of all your chargebacks that you would have to dispute individually. So one day I get home from school, both my parents are waiting for me as I get off the bus. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, well, gonna talk about whatever you did on the computer because it just showed up in the garage.
This is like war games. You did something on your computer.
that was one of my favorite movies. And also I think a generational thing, but
that's true.
The internet had shown up in my garage, and long story short, it really was a mess because I would have to dispute each dollar charge individually. So I ended up selling a domain name, settling with the resellers who found out I didn't have the money to pay them for all that software. And I decided, okay, I'm going to college.
I quit. I'm going to college.
Take a break from the computer because my father walked in one day and says, we're being sued. And it's my retirement fund, your college fund. What did you do on the computer? And God bless him, he let me dig out of my own hole.
That's good.
Really what the moral of the story was, I learned without even knowing it at a very young age, what venture capital is all about. It's about helping a founder who hits that vein in whatever regard to scale the company. And that I believe is an art that you practice kind of like golf. You're playing it your whole life and you can always get a little bit better.
Absolutely. Wow. What a great introduction to the VC world. And it actually makes a lot of sense because, we do a lot of digging here on your angel.co profile. You say that your best, it's very apropos and it's contextually relative. On angel.co, you say on your profile, you say that you're best at early stages of development, product strategy, going to market. And my question was, what about early stage or getting in the trenches do you enjoy the most? But clearly you've given us kind of a lot of context here. You understand the suck. You understand how hard it is to scale a company, especially for first-time founders. And so that's grabbed your heart so much that you continue to be somewhat sadomasochistic and want to go jump back in there.
I'm a masochist. You're exactly right, Peter. I didn't know what it was until, so I call it, get out of college. I was lucky enough to work for some folks that did some early angel investments. And I started to learn what that was all about in 2008. And I was lucky enough that I met some folks in SF that really, I think they introduced me to a couple companies that weren't working out for them. And I was the guy with the money from New York because I had this family office, not mine, but I was helping them make angel investments. I was a dumb one. And I showed up in Menlo. I'm like, hey, I have money for startups. They're like, come on in. And, they ended up kind of teaching me the basics of, hey, this is how angel investing works. This is your job. I know you're an angel, so you know all about this. And then, I got lucky and they introduced me to my partner, Ed. And we started Boldstart. And I remember the first time I'm doing diligence with Ed, I was on a company called Reportive, if you remember, Rahul's first company. And he says, why don't we see how each other does diligence and get to know each other a little bit. And I said, okay. He says, here's a startup. Why don't you go back and we'll reconvene tomorrow. And I must have come back with a binder full of hey, email's a big deal or something, right? It was like this, I curated this research and I was super intellectual about it. And he looks at me and he goes, okay, I don't know what that is. I don't want to see it. I'm good. But why don't I just show you how I do diligence? And Ed, just for background, started his career in the 90s and he's about double the experience that I've got. And I believe this is an apprenticeship-based business, and you have to have someone that has that level of experience, just passing back the street, kind of operational knowledge. And he just picks up the phone. He calls a 415 number that I can remember, and he I'll leave the gentleman's name out of it, but he was head of the Google Apps marketplace. And he goes, hey, Don, have you seen something called Reportive? And he goes, yeah, it's blowing up. You know the founder? I'd love to chat with him. He goes, yep, thanks, appreciate it. We'll do, and I'll introduce you. Hangs up the phone. He goes, what do we learn? That was about 6.5 seconds.
Right.
And I said, wow, they're growing. We're going to do the deal. And he goes, and we're going to get in because I've got an intro that could be useful for that founder. And that's when I knew I really just was going to work well with Ed, because he immediately creates, and this is our ethos at Boldstart, we create two things: options and leverage. So back to your point, how do I get involved early? Most of our investments are pre-product, or we only back founders that are technical and product oriented and that are building in the enterprise. And we do that with 20 to 25 companies per fund. So our first fund was $1 million. And we're currently investing out of our fourth fund. It's about 112, and that ethos hasn't changed. It's been consistent. It's attrition, so we're still standing. But whether it's a founder like Rahul, when he came back for Superhuman, we were his first check.
Right.
And the sole founders are they need a lot of support in every possible way, and that includes just being there. Hey, I got the domain name. Great, awesome. Like just having that interaction. And I remember his first hires and his first releases. We were his first users externally, and creating the options that a founder needs to look at and make a decision, and then the leverage to go kind of take down those options.
I love that. It really sounds, Elliot, like you enjoy being part of the founder's narrative, whether they succeed or fail. Regardless, I can kind of tell you really enjoy being part of the narrative and story of those founders and the startups. Is that fair?
That it's what gets me up in the morning, especially when it's the kind of situation where a lot of folks are they're crazy. They're just why would you go into email, or why I remember Jeff Haney, the first thing I ever said to him was, I've looked at a lot of startups that are doing what you're doing, and I'm just not sold. And he goes, great. He's just so supremely confident in his vision that he's like, great, you can take it or leave it, but this is the way it's going to go. And
what a great way to meet some really interesting characters. Now I'm going to pull on what I'll pull on a string a little bit here from what you just said, because it's just perfect. It's like we're in alignment here a little bit. On Twitter, on July 20th, 2011. So we're going back almost a decade here.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we do our research here.
That's awesome.
We like to keep you accountable. This is actually contextually relative to what you just said. It's amazing. On July 20th, 2011, you said, on a good day, I'd be a VC for free. On a bad day, no amount would be enough. It's the best job in the world. So here's the question real quick. Do you still believe that, and why?
That is actually, I had forgotten about that, but I remember tweeting that. And it's so relevant now, especially kind of right now, because I always looked at when I got into VC, the world was falling apart in a big way. Yeah. And I mean, 08 happened, and people still, even through 09, they were like, well, I don't really know how deep this recession is going to be with the financial crisis. And I just remember thinking, this is the best possible time to scrape together money and start investing, because everybody's kind of pulling back, and
and everything's on sale.
Exactly. And I learned one thing being out west, and that was when a forest fire happens, it's the only way that you get regrowth, right? And to use that for that exact tweet, I still feel exactly the same way. And what I'm realizing is that was my first dip in a cycle. And I think VC is a cyclical business, and I think that in order to call it, quote unquote, earn your stripes in this business, you really have to go through a couple cycles so that you can understand the dynamics, because they're very different. They're just different muscles.
Mm,
when a tide is rising to when it's receding,
fair
to
enough.
when it's uncertain which way it's going. Even that's a different muscle. And when I wrote that tweet, I was working through the end of the recession, but more importantly, the beginning of the recovery, and trying to figure out with our companies when was the right time to scale.
Mm.
And that is a really interesting data point. So yeah, on the best days, it is the greatest job in the world because you could just bask in the glory of some successful investment.
Did you know that there's even more value than just audio or video? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok @VC Hunting, and make sure to sign up for the VC Hunting newsletter, where you'll be able to get weekly news on venture capital, startups, founder stories, and the occasional wisdom extracted from Peter's brain. Go to vchunting.com to sign up. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, so I've kind of a question rising up in my gut here a little bit. What
Yeah.
was over this decade of Bold Start, and obviously you guys are still here on your fourth fund. Congratulations for that. Was there ever a time when you felt like you weren't going to make it? And if so, unpack that for us a little bit. What did you have to shift, or what did you have to pivot, or what did you have to do mentally or physiologically, or what have you, to be able to get through that time of stress? Because I think contextually within the market today, and a lot of our viewers and listeners, it's a tough. We're moving maybe into a recession. Who knows? We're moving into tough times. So, was there a time in your decades of Bold Start where you didn't think you were going to make it, and what did you have to do to get through through those moments?
So there's so many that I'm actually just choosing which one. I mean, number one, I've been lucky to have a partner that, we've been together the whole way here. And the first thing that gets you through is, someone else. It's a really hard road to go alone. And I see a lot of sold GPs doing that. For founders, it's even harder, I think. But, Ed and I, with the caveat, we realize that operationally it's a lot harder at the portfolio level than our level, but we consider ourselves company builders and founders ourselves, and we've been doing that with Boldstart. And I think the lowest moment was when we were coming into our the current fund that we just closed, and started with $1 million. It was all we could raise. I'm happy I helped raise a lot of that one because Ed's really done a great job at the institutional level, so he's kind of taken the ladder.
Oh, so you've earned your stripes.
No, I just passed to get in the door, right? But at the worst moment, it was when you have to kind of have multiple closes for a venture fund, and the mechanisms are pretty complex. It's not like, hey, I'm closing a safe, wire the money, sign here, done. It's there's a lot of side letters, there's a lot of complexity with it, and you have a minimum first close threshold, so you have to be above a certain amount. So. Right. We thought we were above that certain amount. We got a verbal from kind of the investor that got us over the hump. It was an institutional investor. It's about 6:30 when we got the phone call, because we had started all those mechanisms, the lawyers and the other LPs, and you want to make sure you're herding cats, right? Yeah. And got the call that this investor was like, I just got surprised by my board. They said no new investments, and I'm so sorry, but I just can't do it. And we were below the threshold. And that meant we had a kind of tough choice, which was we could either say, we could stop it, but that's a whole bag of worms.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because then you stop it, there's whatever. Or we could just say, okay, we've got to fill that spot, and we've got like 10 days to run the gauntlet. And we decided to go with the other side. And luckily enough, we have some amazing LPs that have been with us a long time that just kind of coached us through it, one in particular. And we came through it, but I think Ed and I just sat in the office. I mean, it was rock bottom. We were like, why is it so hard? And I think when you start asking yourself why it's so hard, it means that you're doing, in a masochistic way, it means, okay, we're in the right place. We're in the right place because this is so excruciatingly hard. I'm asking, why am I even doing this? So building little mechanisms in your head for when it gets really hard to kind of at least just tap on the fishbowl and be like, you're in the right spot. Whether you succeed or fail is going to be up to you. But that's, my father says, better than the alternative. I always thought that was a great line that sits in the back of my head. What, do you not want to be in that? But, so that was the rock bottom. And I think, every fund is hard because it's almost a vote of confidence, every 18 months on how you're doing. And as the firm grows, you want to just find people that we've been lucky to find some great folks and build Boldstart. So I'm trying to figure it out. So I have a target on my head. I want them to be twice as smart. And, I just want somebody gunning for my job, gunning for my job. And I think that if you do it that way, you get used to that severity. It becomes part of the training and the muscle.
It's an interesting way to build yourself up and build your resilience. That's probably a very appropriate term here.
It's a great word.
It's probably a great way to build your resilience. I know that as a founder myself, and having worked with many other founders and VCs, this moment of why is it so hard is a real pivotal moment. And for many people, that is the rock bottom where they say, this is where the only answer is through. We're not quitting. The only answer is through. And so I'm wondering if there's any other moments like that you've had that have been really profound, that have helped you become, the individual and the man you are today, as well as a successful VC. And I'm wondering if you're willing to share any of those, if you can think of them off the cuff.
I'll give you as a VC. I always like to say that my getting involved in the companies at a later stage, when I was doing this, was investing for a family office. We got some good ones, but we also got some ones that I think, with some experience, I really wouldn't have invested in. And when the credit crisis hit and 08 happened and everything else, I had to go through situations where I would be the one, because the CEO, for whatever reason, just couldn't handle it. 80-person organization, and we had to scale it to 20 in in a week. And I was the guy that, the new guy, right? They're like, hey kid, here's the keys, make sure everybody gets severance and make sure nobody ends up in tech.
Oh man, you were you were that dude.
At the time I thought I was very unique, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy at that age, because you think it's about you somehow. Right. But, learning these things is part of it. But, I learned all the stuff you don't want to do when you start investing. And it's kind of, so I had to help this company scale down in 2009. And I just remember crawling up into a ball at the end of the day and thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? And the only way I got through it was, I called somebody else who was a little bit ahead of me on the investment career. And I just said, how do you handle this? I said, you don't. You're about to find out if you want to be a VC or not, man. That's what you wanted, right?
Wow.
I helped you get here.
That's the real.
It's not a glorious job. It's a job where it's going to have real hard times and real good times. And your job is to manage being the rock, in between those things. Because within the microcosm of a company, it oscillates, man.
For sure.
I mean, the classic Silicon Valley thrown up in the dumpster. You're just like, what? So I always laugh when I see that scene, because I'm like, well, if you want this, that's what it's going to be. And so the advice that I would, that I learned and that I would pass along is, especially with a founder, if it's your first time, or even if it's not your first time, go find someone who isn't going through it for the first time and have them give you a gut check. At the very least, get out there and just make sure that you're not a snowflake, because sometimes that helps.
I'm just curious, mostly just for my own humor. Yeah. What does snowflake mean to you?
Unique and special.
Okay, yeah.
Unique and special. It's a classic human condition. We're all unique and special. And then, I always find when I tell founders, and they have a big issue, sometimes you learn that you're not the one that can give them an answer. You have to give them a person who can help them find the answer. And so I always get them wrapped with other founders right up front, because I think that, there's some things as a VC you can help a founder with, and some things that, that founder needs to be mentored by someone who's been on that side of the
Absolutely.
situation.
Well, with 10 years, nearly a decade with Boldstart, you have the opportunity to really be able to, which is kind of really cool, by the way. You can kind of backstop your time at Boldstart at 2010, 2020-ish or so, and that kind of gives you a nice time frame of sorts. What would you say is the biggest thing that's changed in venture capital, in your opinion, and what needs to change, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a good one. Well, I can, so, being where we are in the world with this pandemic,
For
I
sure.
think everything that I'll say is kind of right up to the line on when the pandemic started. And I think
Mhm.
what will happen is, every expectations will get readjusted and the world will find a equilibrium on valuation. But what I've noticed over the last 10 years is that when I first got involved, Y Combinator was in Boston or in Cambridge,
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
and so was AngelList. And I got to know the founders at AngelList pretty well, and I remember being interviewed for being on AngelList in the early days, and it was a phone interview with Nivi or Naval,
Uh,
and they would get on, they'd be like, "Who are you? And what would founders say about you?" And I think the what I tuned into, I feel like lucky and early,
mm,
and I was lucky to have a network that and friends that were involved in it, so I could see it. Was this founder empowerment? I remember Nivi always told the story
that's right.
where I think he was at Bessemer or something, and he wanted to equalize the informational symmetry on
Mm,
each side of the table, and you didn't know what a term sheet looked like before you got one. And all of that has changed in such a great way where founders can go on, download legal docs and find all these resources.
mm,
So with that, I think, and those two companies moving out west, it was kind of the advent of the seed market
right.
as we
Right.
look at it today. And people have been saying since then, seed's the new A. As they become bigger, our round sizes have roughly doubled, if not
Right.
tripled.
That's true.
Right, the
Inflation.
inflation, right?
Now we have pre-seed, and then we have pre-seed, and then we have
Don't get
pre-seed ICO, and then I'm
so
sorry,
I will bookmark a funny anecdote about
VIP
pre-seed
ICO.
because pre-seed is one, and post-seed and seed prime and all this.
Yes.
But
Release the
that's the
cube.
maturity of a stage. I think it's just been the maturing of seed,
Mm,
where I think a lot of what I see now is that the traditional, we'll call them A-round firms, are starting to reassert some dominance over what they feel is the A-round. I
mm,
think that is starting to blend a little bit with what seed is.
mm.
So then you get this pre-seed. I'm just gonna start one-upping everyone and call it soil. But I was lucky. We registered
Dirt.
back
We should call it dirt stage.
third stage. That wasn't me. I think that was Maurice at WTI. He was joking about that. But we registered firstcheck.vc a long time ago because
Mm,
that's really, we want to anchor ourselves to be that first runner in the race, whether it's with angels or not. There's a little flexibility there. What we don't want to do is ever drift up to be what is traditionally viewed as an A-round fund, because we don't want to grow that big. We want to be nimble and focused
mm,
enough where we could be kind of getting our ownership target at this. So what's changed is I think that we've officially kind of reset that bar, and the
mm.
labeling will catch up. But what I think is important is that founders have the options before that larger round with, say, a $400 to $1 billion fund
Mm,
to prove out enough where they can get the right, not only valuation, but get the right attention from the right partner, and
mm,
really find their best fit for a Series A. We'll go with the current terminology. And as a seed investor, my job is to help them get as much traction or customers or hires or whatever it is, but then also kind of help them close the best possible Series A round. And
absolutely.
so, as I'm seeing the kind of evolution of the last 10 years, what I see is that everything's exactly the same. It's just almost evolved and reset a run.
Well, there's a lot of quotes around that pretty much everything is just bundling and rebundling and bundling and rebundling.
I buy that.
Yeah, it's just
Wheels on the bus, they go round
yeah,
and round.
we take something and then we functionally decompose it, and then people figure out that some of these decomposed ideas can be rebundled into another unit of value. And so it's pretty much how it works in a lot of ways. And I find that to be fair, although I don't want to discount a comment you made, which is that founders today have so many more resources and tools available to them
Huge.
what we didn't have a decade ago. And I know that as a founder. I mean, I used to have to it felt like I was going to a daggone library and having to fill out one of those, what are they called? Those
You
card
remember Venture
card
Hacks,
catalogs.
right? That was a great
Yeah.
blog. It was like the option pool shuffle
Exactly.
and all these great things. And
Yeah,
you just envision like people in some room somewhere going, oh, the information got out. Oh no, you know, kind of thing. But
there has been a lot more democratization of the information as well, for sure.
Yeah, and what hasn't changed is the best founders still have all the options, right? I think that if you're a serial founder with a proven track record, you have more options than ever. And, you know, I think the first round, kudos to those guys, because they just, the perfect name for a fund. That's what you do. But I think that if you look at the leverage that the best founders want, it's exactly the same. It's they want a little money to prove it, nail it, then scale it.
Prove it, nail it, scale it. I love it.
They understand the number one cause of failure is premature scaling. And they want just enough money to kind of really gauge that ship and calibrate it before they start launching out with more money.
Perfect. I love that. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. I'm going to ask you one more question here. It was between blockchain or a great investment. Based on just that context, which one do you want to, maybe we should ask both. Let me ask both, because I'm just curious, Elliot. I really am.
Blockchain's a loaded issue. Yeah.
It is. You can answer it relatively quickly. As I scrolled through your 2016 up to today Twitter feed, I saw more and more tweets about blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And so I was just curious, and the question I had here was, what are your thoughts on blockchain? From 2017, you've posted a little bit more on crypto. Do you have any predictions, or do you have any ideas around blockchain, where it's going to head, and what's the interest to you, I guess, is maybe the question.
I'm going to fit this into 30 seconds. So Boldstart, we're enterprise seed investors. And you know, we don't do anything involving a consumer. We just don't do it. So my interest in blockchain was as the infrastructure component of a distributed ledger.
Makes sense.
And when we were seeing it pop up, we do a lot of work with kind of large enterprise buyers. So good percentage of my day is checking in with them, seeing what their priorities are, seeing where their interests are, and kind of understanding their pain points. And as we saw, you know, midway through 2018, we saw a lot of learning budgets for infrastructure, blockchain, and hyperledger stuff. And I think the Ethereum folks put out an enterprise network as well. So what we decided to do was a partnership with IBM and Comcast, and we built a small venture fund that did, I think it was going to do 5 50K checks. And that's exactly what it did. And it was basically an exercise to understand if there was a market emerging. And I can tell you as a quick kind of ending to this, we discovered that it's going to be a component kind of like AI. And my thoughts on it are it'll be embedded where it's needed, but it's not a sector in and of itself from an enterprise stack perspective.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Well, that's awesome. I'm going to give you the final word here, Elliot. Thanks so much for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me.
Let everyone out there know, where can they find out more information about you and Boldstart? Give us all the deets.
So if you go to Firstcheck.vc, you'll find Boldstart. I am at ET Durbin on Twitter. And one thing that you just have to know about us is if you're technical and you're building an enterprise company, say hi, come see us. We are big at starting the conversation as early as possible.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Elliott Durbin. It has been a life-giving conversation and a blessing to me. I hope that we can speak again soon.
Peter, thanks for having me.
Man, it was great. That was a great conversation with Elliott Durbin, GP at Boldstart.vc. But you can go to Firstcheck.vc to check them out. We had a little bit of a conversation before we began, and I just asked him how he was doing, considering all the self-quarantining and COVID that's going on, and he was telling me that he's spending a lot of time just being helpful as best he can with his community and with his investments, founders, et cetera, which obviously is part of his job. But it's great to know that he's doing this, he's reaching out, and he's being a human during this time when it's hard to be connected with each other because of all the quarantining coming up. I do want to say congratulations to Elliot and Ed at Boldstart for coming up on 10 years of surviving the fray in VC. I mean, there's not many that can last that long, and then not many that can last even longer than 10. And so congratulations, Elliot. I wish you all the best. And Ed, I wish you guys all the best in your success moving towards the future. One of the things that I loved about his story, Elliott's story, is that he jumped into the game of entrepreneurship head first, just like it's very reminiscent to kind of how I did on the web. Just start building stuff and building web pages, and then suddenly someone's like, "Hey, can you build me something?" And it was just his story really reminded me of the early days of the internet, the exciting the unknowns of what was going on with selling and buying. And he brought up CompUSA, which I apologize for everyone out there. I know of people who bought video games, burned them, and then returned the video games. It wasn't actually me. I was just really excited. I haven't heard CompUSA in like a decade, or probably even longer now, since they went out of business. So it was just great to hear that story from Elliot about how he's getting into templates and shipping stuff, and it's just funny. It literally reminded me of my high school days back in Jacksonville, Florida, where I used to build web pages on the internets in the late 90s, and go to CompUSA with the money that I and buy video games. It just brought up a lot of nostalgia for me, I suppose. I guess it's one of those things. But man, I really appreciated his stories, and one thing I really also appreciated is that tweet that he made on July 20th, 2011. On a good day, I'd be a VC for free. On a bad day, no amount would be enough. The best job in the world. And it seems like a decade later, absolutely, guys, a decade later, Elliot still is ridiculously passionate about this game. A little sadomasochistic because he enjoys the early stage and getting in there in the trenches with guys, and all that's where all the hard work happens, to be honest. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate that he still has that passion, and it's still clear and evident in the way that he communicates with us. I was curious about the blockchain because you guys know I love blockchain and Bitcoin, but it's interesting that Elliot has this idea that might not be a market of its own, but rather it's going to be a component of other markets. That's a unique perspective. I don't know if I'm 100% there. I don't know if I maybe know enough to be able to say whether that's true or not. But it is an interesting way of looking at it, as merely as a tech stack than actually a market by its own. Guys, I love this conversation. Elliot was great. I even loved the little faux background he had with the fireplace in the background. Thanks to Zoom for that. If you want more information on the field notes of this interview, guys, it's easy. Go to vchunting.com/Elliott Durbin. It's been great, guys. This is the tail end of season 3. That's right, we're 3 seasons in. Tail end of season 3, and who knows where we're going to be headed next? With everything going on, who knows, guys? We're going to keep creating great content, keep having great conversations, and hopefully I'll see you guys over at evo.af, the community for marketers and brand-aware individuals for the mobile, video, and remote-first world. Join me, guys, over at evo.af. We'll see you guys next time.